Man Who Knew Too Little is almost an accidental A Course in Miracles parable about perception, projection, identity, and the strange freedom that can arise when the mind stops taking its interpretations so seriously. The entire movie works because Wallace Ritchie, played by Bill Murray, mistakes a real espionage conspiracy for an interactive theater experience. Everyone else is terrified. Wallace thinks it's improv. That setup mirrors a surprisingly deep ACIM insight. The world we experience is heavily shaped by interpretation. Same events, completely different meaning systems. The serious characters interpret danger everywhere: threat, betrayal, death, urgency. Wallace interprets everything as play. Now, ACIM would not say external danger is irrelevant in the human experience. The film is a comedy, not a literal spiritual model. But symbolically, Wallace demonstrates what happens when fear-based interpretation loosens. Because he doesn't fully buy into the fear narrative, he moves through situations with spontaneity, openness, humor, and surprisingly intuitive success. That's fascinating psychologically. The ego thrives on overinterpretation. What does this mean about me? What if something goes wrong? How do I protect myself? Wallace bypasses much of that because he assumes this is all part of the show. Again, taken literally, that could become denial or recklessness. But symbolically, it resembles ACIM's idea that the ego's drama gains power largely through belief and investment. The ego is deeply theatrical. ACIM often portrays the world as a kind of stage where identities perform roles: victim, hero, betrayer, winner, loser, special one, rejected one. Most people become psychologically fused with the role. Wallace doesn't. Ironically, because he thinks he's acting, he becomes more authentic than the serious people around him. That's very ACIM. The ego's carefully managed self-image often blocks direct presence. Wallace blunders into immediacy because he isn't constantly self-monitoring. There's also a profound ACIM theme around innocence. Wallace is not enlightened. He's confused, naive, socially awkward, and oblivious. But his innocence disarms situations repeatedly because he approaches others without the same degree of suspicion and calculation. ACIM distinguishes innocence from naivete in an important way. Ego innocence says, nothing bad exists. True innocence says, I do not have to organize my identity around fear. Wallace accidentally embodies some of that. He meets assassins, spies, and criminals with the same relaxed curiosity he'd bring to party guests. Because he doesn't perceive attack in the expected way, the entire dynamic shifts. ACIM repeatedly suggests perception influences experience more deeply than we realize. Then there's the improvisation theme. Wallace thinks he's participating in an immersive performance, so he keeps saying yes to uncertainty. That resembles a healthier spiritual posture than the ego's need for total control. The ego constantly scripts what should happen, who people should be, how life should unfold. Wallace, meanwhile, responds moment to moment, not strategically, experientially. There's almost a holy foolishness to him. In many wisdom traditions, including some readings of ACIM, the wise fool archetype appears, the person who looks ridiculous from the perspective of rigid social intelligence, but remains oddly free because they are less imprisoned by conceptual seriousness. Bill Murray's comedic style actually amplifies this beautifully. His deadpan presence creates the sense that Wallace never fully enters the collective panic field, and panic is contagious. ACIM says the ego's world runs on contagions of fear, judgment, and projection. Most characters in the film intensify situations because they believe their interpretations absolutely. Wallace interrupts that feedback loop unintentionally. There's also an ACIM parallel around identity confusion. Wallace is constantly mistaken for someone else or misunderstood, yet he himself is barely trying to establish a fixed identity. The ego is obsessed with definition. Who am I? How am I perceived? Am I important? Wallace mostly just keeps participating. This makes him strangely fluid, not because he has transcended ego, but because he lacks some of the rigid defensive structures others carry. Still, there's an important caution here. The man who knew too little should not be interpreted as just ignore reality and everything works out. That becomes spiritual bypass or magical thinking. Wallace succeeds partly through luck, genre mechanics, and comedy logic. Real life still requires discernment, boundaries, and responsibility. But the film does expose something true. Fearful interpretation often creates far more suffering than immediate reality itself. And perhaps the deepest ACIM resonance is this. Everyone else thinks salvation comes from mastering the game. Wallace moves freely because he never fully believes the game is ultimate reality to begin with. That doesn't make him superior, just less psychologically trapped by the script.